Yeah. So far, I've got 2 things right. Bob's had to leave because he's not feeling well, but I wanted to say a big shout out to Bob because he's been unwell and he made the effort to come to Lit Balm, which is pretty amazing, Marc. So
yeah. Is he back? So he's back home again, is he?
Yeah.
Good to hear. Yeah.
So that's all good.
1
minute. I have to check my instructions from Jonathan.
Oh, okay.
Do you have written instructions or?
Of course I do. I have a Word document. It's got bold in it. Yes.
No,
Who said that? Can anyone hear me? I heard that.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. You can hear me? So I can't hear anyone else.
Ah.
I'm not getting any sound.
Have you tried to? Oh, I guess did you send that in a message?
Yeah. Check your preferences for audio. Output.
Or maybe you should sign out and sign in again. I don't know. Sometimes that helps. I don't know. I think that looks like Michael.
I think so, yeah.
Or as I have done in a meeting and embarrassed myself, check you're not on mute. You haven't got the mute button on.
Although a reading where no one can hear anybody might be interesting.
Lots of sign language.
There's Anania. Hi, Michael. Hooray for your book.
All right, so my last lot of instructions is, that's it. Watch out for Zoom bombers. Enjoy the session. I feel like, it's like it's impinging on my enjoyment of the session to worry about Zoom bombers. But I think we're good. I'm going to mute everybody. And you can still unmute yourself at this point. If there's a Zoom bomber, I'll take away that right. And the chat's still there, of course. And I'm going to hand over to Marc. Who's on mute? Because I muted everyone. Is it not loving you unmuting yourself?
I know the battery in my mouse is low, so it took me half an hour to do that. Sorry. Welcome everybody to the 79th episode of Lit Balm since the pandemic began. So Michael, you will have the honor of the next issue of Lit Balm dedicated to you will be number 80. So I think that's a pretty good number. Anyway, tonight we have a founders reading, which is a slightly extended set for the co-hosts. And we have our original founder here, one of our original founders here tonight, Larissa Shmailo, will be joining us. And it's wonderful to see all of you here tonight, including Maxine Chernoff, Martine Bellen, and Elaine Equi. We are delighted to have you, and we shall commence by, I think it's a single poem by our missing founder, Jonathan Penton, tonight, which Cassandra is going to read. Just briefly, Jonathan founded Unlikely Stories, an electronic journal of literature and art, in 1998. Since then, he's lent editorial and management assistance to many artistic ventures such as Mad Hat Inc., the New Orleans Poetry Festival, Rigorous, and Big Bridge. In 2005, he founded Unlikely Books, which publishes 3 to 5 books of poetry a year. He's organized literary performances and performed himself across the United States. His poetry books are Last Chap from Virgin Press, Blood and Salsa and Painting Rust, Prosthetic Gods, Standards of Saturday, and the free e-chap book Backstories, which you can download from Argotist eBooks. Cassandra.
Yeah, so I have a short one from Jonathan, but it's a goodie, and it's called Small Comments. There are many reasons I don't write love poems. Right now, though, I'd like a single reason to write one. The romantic Jonathan comes out for the Boxing Day celebration, Marc.
Oui. And now we move on to Cassandra, who's an award-winning writer, scholar of prose poetry, professor of writing and literature in Melbourne, Australia. Her most recent books of prose poetry are Pre-Raphaelite, Leftovers, and Fugitive Letters. She is currently writing a book of prose poetry on the atomic bomb with funding from the Australia Council. Cassandra co-wrote prose poetry, an introduction, and the anthology of Australian prose poetry. She is commissioning editor for the wonderful magazine Westerly. Let's hear what you got, Cassandra.
I have 3 prose poems, 2 normal sized ones and 1 short one. And I celebrate my birthday not too much before Christmas, which I hate because everyone does the combined birthday present. It's like, happy birthday, Merry Christmas. And anyway, I like to go away for my birthday. And a couple of years ago, I was in Japan. So I wrote this poem called The Blue Bower. At Hotel Granvia in Kyoto, a skinny Santa Claus in a blue fur trimmed suit rings a bell to announce the roast beef is being carved. You take up a naked plate while I wait for the cheesy happiness at the bottom of a seafood doria. I'm post-martini and you've had 3 glasses of wine. Salarymen fueled by the bottomless tukuri of sake are cheering as the Christmas tree casts a pattern of turquoise light over the buffet. You nudge a silver ogle from the Imperial Palace across the table. When I open the lid, it plays Happy Birthday, and Blue Santa brings me a slice of strawberry shortcake on a heart-shaped plate. I take the cherry blossom from inside the music box, and one of its tiny petals comes to rest beside my dessert spoon, a pink dot like a full stop. The second prose poem is called Gingerbread Boy. It was actually called Gingerbread Man, but it was translated into Japanese. So I have some really wonderful Japanese co-translators and friends, some of them at Meiji University. And so they said because they don't have the equivalent of Gingerbread Man, it became Gingerbread Boy. And this was written for that sort of Japanese readership where anthropomorphism is really kind of amazing and cool. Not long after you leave, I make a life-size gingerbread man to replace you. I have to bake him in sections and glue him together with toffee, but he holds together as I lay him out on the kitchen bench. I give him a little check shirt made of icing and a Panama hat made out of Rice Krispies with a licorice trim. I've made him spicy with just enough cinnamon to keep me warm at night. When we cuddle up on the couch, he places his rounded hand on my thigh. I thought about giving him fingers, but he's more submissive without opposable thumbs. When I take him to bed, he molds himself around me, stroking my hair and whispering sweet things in my ear. I don't complain about crumbs in the bed because in his arms, I dream about peppermint and candy canes. On Christmas Eve, he absconds to Coles supermarket to hang out with the gingerbread women, liberating them from their plastic wrappers. When he returns, goofy smile on his face, I break him into little pieces and dip his body into my milky coffee until he's sludge at the bottom of my Christmas mug. I look at the mixing bowl and start wondering when you'll be back. And the final one is because it was very sad to hear that Joan Didion had died. And I had a poem that I'd written a while back that used the word Didion-esque in it. So it's just a very short one. Blue twilight unfurls its splendor, a Didion-esque gloaming for the lonely. I try to catch its tint in my cup, to taste its calm, but its inkiness spills over me until I am glass. Bathed in owl light, I float on short blue wavelengths. I cannot be broken. So I am going to introduce the intrepid Marc Vincenz. And I know that it's been a couple of weeks, so I'm excited to come back to this and hear what the end is going to be. So here we go. Marc Vincenz is an Anglo-Swiss American poet, a fiction writer, translator, editor, publisher, designer, multi-genre artist, and musician. He has published 18 books of poetry, including more recently, Leaning into the Infinite, Syndicate of Water and Light, Here Comes the Night Dust, Einstein, Fledermaus, and the Little Book of Earthly Delights. Vincenz's newest collection, A Brief Conversation with Consciousness, was just released by Unlikely Books, and it's beautiful, so grab a copy. A Brief Conversation with Consciousness was sorry, said that because it's so good, I had to say it twice. An album of music, ambience, and verse, Left Hand Clapping, is forthcoming from Tree Torn Records. Vincenz is also a prolific translator. He's translated from, join in, German, Romanian, and French. He's published 10 books of translations, most recently Unexpected Development by award-winning Swiss poet and novelist Klaus Mertz with White Pine in 2018, and it was a finalist for the 2016 Cliff Becker Book Prize in Translation. His translation of Klaus Mertz's selected poems, An Audible Blue, is forthcoming also from White Pine Press. Vincenz is editor and publisher of the Stella Mad Hat Press and publisher of the brilliant New American Writing. He's lived all over the world. It's karaoke bio time. From Brazil, come on, to China, to Iceland, to India. He was born in Matilda Hospital on the Peak in Hong Kong, but he now lives on a farm in rural Western Massachusetts overlooking, that's it, Herman Melville's Greylock Mountain. And where you've been waiting for it, it's a Boxing Day special. There are more bald-faced hornets, mud daubers, and cankerworms than people. I gotta love a cankerworm, Marc. Will you please cankerworm for us?
I shall canker away. And so this comes from a novella called The City of Lemons that I've been working on, which is within itself a part of a novel consisting of 3 novellas. And then going back down, each chapter is basically a prose poem in and of itself. And this section is called War and Creation. And well, I'll let you decide whether it's prose, poetry, or something in between. The air shook and the earth beneath shifted. The coffee cups and their grounds went flying. A microwave was flipped on its head. An unwashed dish in the sink shattered into a million pieces like tiny infants' teeth. Still, we kept on breathing in that citrus-infused oxygen. The grand obsession in all the halls and corridors with their doors wide open was the length of the rope. Whispers echoed on every street corner. How long can we hold? Is there any merit to this? I've got 60 days to go. Let me savor my lemons, or thank good mother I have a bank account in the New Hebrides. Do you have cryo? A man said to another man. Good mother says, let my soft fingers guide you, a fourth man said. So you want your daughter and your foundling and your wife to join you in cryo. Mustachio had a new pinstripe suit on. Then he said, what's with all the hypertension? What do you expect? I said. It's all these intense thoughts, as if a throng open to let the light outside. At least that's what I think, I said. I was more flappable in those days. All my neurons were firing, but I had just stepped on this boat and was drifting away. Perhaps it is tactless for me to say, I said, feeling like I had 10,000 eyes upon me and knowing there was not a single thing I could do about it. But I said, knowing this, something is better than nothing. Soon the lemons turned speckled and gray, and our beautiful purified air was escaping in breaths and gasps and meaningless gulps of sentences. How unfulfilling it was, minutiae in the margins of the self-fulfilling. As good mother had said, you can empty a cup into one sip, or you can savor it. In the end, it all comes down to the sacrificial lambs, or the lack of them, and my part in their disappearance. I ask you, though, sibling, how could a non-functioning being have any objections at all? It's like the insects. She who hides, hides well, right beside the queen in a deep slumber, or she who is the master of licorice, or that behind-the-scenes supporter, the master of the gill or the nostril, or she whom without the ne'er-do-well are in doubt. Count the silver screens, sibling. Count the palms on the boardwalk. 23,417. The number of folk to turn over tonight. The number of souls crushed to dust. Count them all on your 7 fingers, I thought. Then the anteater had a thought. I remember once in the old world when Zimmer's bookstore still had an awning. I must have been, what, 15? At that time, the precepts were not so strict, and old man Zimmer's portrait hung high over the register, gazing down with condescending eyes. What are you reading tonight? They asked. At first I was struck I was stuck to the classics, the Andaluvian Wells, the Malthusian diaries, the idols of usefulness. And high upon the top shelf, out of old man Zimmer's line of sight, Yves Saint Elixir's backfiring motorcycles. All this via Parliament, before the Constitution was repealed, and each city was on speaking terms. But then, on a foggy day in my own small, still city of lavender, over tea and secret shots of dynamite and a breeze that drew off the Atlantic, young man Zimmer showed me his father's secrets. Way before the stone was ever extracted, when governments tumbled upon each other and every military coup was a president and 5 credits could buy you a beer, the world was full of books. Words rained down even when you were not there. Back then, they were all marionettes, their limbs wired and backfired, and few paid attention. Young man Zimmer and I did our shots behind the sociology section. Good mother forbid. We smoked a Cuban cigar and touched each other's chests. My Angora sweater upheld all his caresses. Still, the incense in the shop, patchouli, I recall, or perhaps it was the Havanese cigar, led us to believe that everything in our lives had led to this moment. We were of one mind, he and I. And that afternoon, in his father's secret chambers, he showed me books from every corner of the globe, every written period of history, mysteries, and untold fortunes, unspeakable prayers and incantations. In those old days, they had bound their knowledge in leather and vellum and paper, so fine it could fly. It was such a simple thing, this moment of shared wisdom. All we had to do was pretend. Out on the streets, there were cheers of applause and rumbles of disgrace. Banners flew both high and low. Nigh is the night to dance, it was said. From lambs to lemons, read the headlines. The markets had all crashed with the exception of the illustrious index. We hold up the world, their all-seeing leaders said. Economies of scales, economies of indices, economies of the world unite, the Magi said. But of course, nothing worked to prescription, and good mother had her wily ways with us. No matter how hard we tried to bend her will, she bent us back. Nothing can stop the creative drive, good mother says. We navigated past the guard stations, the sandbag rocket launchers and their gunners. Another airstrike was imminent, it was said. And watch, over there are gas lines. We made it to exit number 9 in no time. Mustachio met us here behind a thicket of overgrown roses. The fisherwoman is waiting for you, he said. Your daughter will meet you there, he said. And what of our foundling, you asked, massaging your earlobe. She's already in cryo, he said. But there's one more thing, Mount Kilimanjaro, he said, handing me a slough of papers wrapped in 3 long red rubber bands. My favorite book in young man Zimmer's secret room was Chanvier's The Sleep and Dreams of Ignominy. It's long been extracted from collective history, but in the scheme of things, it bended the will of humankind. We all had a common predecessor, someone in all of her antiquity was waiting on eternity. A just cause, I believe me. Once the wealthiest of suitors would have wanted me, but I've never sought wealth. I've never had an affinity for gemstones and gold, silver or mercury. Yes, like me, you were all about the bees and the trinkets they carry. That's why we're still in love moments before the crowd draw. And we surge into the chambers, all 3 of us running in like we're the last cause. Turn around, said the checkered woman beside me. She waved her hands and pointed at the machine ahead, a tubular thing interlocked with some kind of magnetic isotopic overhang. You could imagine ivy growing up the sides of the things. Mutations, wild aberrations, the man said, holding your keys, which you forgot to hand in earlier. I'll get these where they belong, he said, clapping his hands, nodding. Move on, roared overhead through the drone. There was a burst of fire, the ground quivered. Do you enjoy roasted lamb, the man said. At times, I said, wiping my eyes. Where is your book of charms now, you said, fitting your head into a deep emulsion pillow. This is how you sleep, said the saleswoman. in her puffy yoga pants. She plopped on the mattress and bounced like a 6-year-old. Just 65 credits, she said, tapping her temple. There were pads and cushions to fit all heads and buttocks. Any form of anomaly accounted for, read the label on your pillow. Suddenly, the building vibrated. Nothing to worry about, said the saleswoman. This will cushion the blow, she laughed. Seriously, we're safe here, she said, straightening her kerchief. The foundations and walls are 17 feet thick, she said. Then knocking the wall, if worst comes to worst. We'll all be sealed in here like Egyptian queens. But then, that's why you're here, isn't it? She glanced at her clipboard. Ah, she said, giving me the once-over. Now I understand. You're a red button pusher. From that moment on, we were treated like VIPs. My daughter and I slept in one suite, you and the foundling in another. There were 7 days of tests, they said. Inside the cryo park was nothing to look at, outside of the bonsai garden at its center, and the tiny library, which included such classics as The Good Mother's Word, Informative Social Feats by Duchamp, Sustenance, Navigation, and Butterflies in the Hair by Konzelik. Still, while preparing for our long sleep, we found time to savor things together. Lemon sorbet, blueberry waffles, flambéed crepe Suzette, The Handmaiden's Passage, a poem by Chong-Ni, a violin concerto by Paulier written when he still had both his hands. The tests were tedious and involved the excruciating implantation of electrodes. I was clasping my daughter's hand through the worst of it when the air raid siren began to shriek somewhere high above. Thank you. And now let me introduce our co-founder, Larissa Shmailo, who is a poet, novelist, translator, editor, writing coach, and critic. Larissa's new book is The Writing Resilience Workshop, a book of prompts designed to elicit elements of the writer's story and form the basis of a memoir. Larissa is the leader and writing coach for the Writing Resilience Workshop for writers and aspiring writers affected by trauma, addiction, and/or mental illness. Her most recent novel is Sly Bang from Spite and Dival. Her first novel was Patient Women from Blazevox. Her poetry collections are Medusa's Country, #Special Characters, In Paran, and the chapbook A Cure for Suicide, and the ebook Fib Sequence. Her poetry CDs are The No Net World and Exorcism tracks are available from iTunes, etc. Her work has appeared in the anthologies Measure for Measure, an anthology of poetic meters, Words for the Wedding from Penguin, Contemporary Russian Poetry from Dalkey Archives, Choice Words, Writers on Abortion from Haymarket, and many others. Larissa is the original English language translator of the first futurist opera, Victory Over the Sun by Alexei Khrushchev, performed at the Los Angeles County Museum, the Garage Museum of Moscow, and Brooklyn Academy of Art and Theaters and universities worldwide. Larissa also edited the anthology 21st Century Russian Poetry and has been a translator on the Russian Bible for the Eugene A. Nader Institute for Biblical Scholarship of the American Bible Society. Welcome, Larissa. Welcome back.
Thank you so much, Marc. It's great to be back, and I love Lit Balm with all my heart, and I'm very proud of being a co-founder of this monumental series. So thank you very much for inviting me, and I will read some poems, some in meter, some not. So this first one is In Love, and it's called Personal. I want to know what makes you tick. I want to know what makes you fickle. I want to know what makes you stick. Tell me, which ion propels you, which soothsayer spells you, which folk singer trills you, which hardwood distills you, which downward dog twists you, which protest resists you, which neural net fires you, which siren desires you, which villanelle sings you, which jailbreaker springs you, which Uncle Sam wants you, which calculus daunts you, which lullaby lulls you, which confidence gulls you, which apple you'll bite from, which hither you'll welcome. What makes me Forget the right answers, consult necromancers, allow the forbidden, ignore the guilt-ridden, unlearn all the learning, embrace this new burning to know what makes you tick. And this is out of love. And it's called The More You Leave. The more you leave, the more I want you back. When you return, our love life seems to lack. Believing you are unassailable, I yearn for you to be available. And then you come, I cannot be more bored. I like your leave, but not your coming toward. Your distance charms, disarms my eager heart, but close, I wish we were again apart. Do stay away and I'm forever wrapped, but now you leave me empty, dull, and sapped. So go away, I'll love you as before. Love's ebb and flow is tricky as a whore. This next one is called Skin. My tongue is bruised. My nude is creaky. Like a cabbage, I sit and wait for you. I stutter like an old gun. Take me, know the fast love of my hair. Your beady little eyes transfix me like rats at the foot of my bed. Your limp pendant wrists still hang on my door. You snicker, get a grip. Your skin is a labyrinth. I follow like a duct. I follow the duct of your eyes like a skein to the combinatory bull. Eyes forward, now toward where I leap for the horns. Won't you come in, he sighs. You own too big a piece of me. Your eyes say spare some change and I don't want to. I take and give no quarter and I've already cut my hair. Skin is just sausage we call home. Skin is just sausage we call home. And I'll end with a poem in dipodic meter, which is called In Paran. I grew up wild and reckless in the land of desert nomads, in the arid lands that lie near the promised land in Egypt, that land of milk and honey they were saving for my brother, and the land of Pharaoh's bondage where my mother's kin were born. I lived my life near Canaan and the slaving lands of Egypt. I lived my life an outcast in the desert of Paran. I grew up wild and stubborn, my hand against my father, at war with all my kinfolk, my kin at war with me. I grew up wild and skittish like a scared colt in a sandstorm. I laughed at mules and camels that never could break free, but I learned to run in sandstorms and how to eat my water and how to find oases and how to take the heat. I learned to talk to demons, to tempters, and to genies. I learned to talk to devils, to outcasts just like me. I learned to love and pity my younger brother Isaac when they took him to the slaughter, not even asking why. God made me make the manna for Isaac and his children. My demons said they'd be here, 12 tribes of them someday, in this land of desert nomads near the promised land and Egypt, near the land of milk and honey in the desert of Paran. Thank you. I'll turn it back over to Marc.
Thank you, Larissa. So wonderful to have you back again with us. And
Wonderful to be here.
how are things going?
Everything's going swimmingly. We have the Writing Resilience Workshop and now a book to go with it, a workbook. So anybody interested in doing it, it doesn't have to be just for people who are affected by addiction, trauma, or mental illness. Anyone who struggles might find a way of using the Writing Resilience Workbook to write a memoir. It's designed to elicit elements of your story. So that's what has been going on with me.
Do you have a website for that, or how can people be in touch?
You can go to larissashmailo.com and there's a section Writing Resilience, and the workbook is described there too.
Okay, great, great. Maybe stick it in the chat if you've got a second, yeah?
Okay.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Larissa. Did you have something, did you have any other thoughts?
No, thank you. I'm waiting to hear from you now.
Okay, good. So now we're delighted to have our feature today, which include the amazing poets Martine Bellen, Elaine Equi, and Maxine Chernoff. And we're going to begin with Martine today, whose 10th collection, An Anatomy of Curiosity, will be published by Mad Hat Press. Her other collections include The Amazing Cage of Light, new and selected poems from Spite and Duyvil, The Vulnerability of Order from Copper Canyon, Tales of Murasaki and Other Poems, Sun and Moon Press, which was a winner of the National Poetry Series. Martine has collaborated with David Rosenboom on the opera No Opera, which has its world premiere at Red Cat in LA. And she co-wrote the libretto for Moon in the Mirror, text by Belen and Chung and composer Stephen Dembski, and was recently performed at Blue Gallery in New York City. Martine has been a recipient of the City Arts Cause Grant, Queen's Art Fund, New York Foundation for the Arts, and has received a residency from the Rockefeller Foundation at the Bellagio Center in Bellagio, Italy. For more information about Martine's work, visit her website, www.martinebellen.com, and I'm sure she'll put it in the chat later in case any of you are interested. Lovely to see you, Martine.
Oh, thank you, Marc. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for inviting me to read, and I'm so enjoyed hearing your novella or novel or poetry or whatever it was. So thank you for that, and I'm thrilled to be reading with Elaine and Maxine and Larissa and Cassandra. So I hope everybody's having wonderful holidays, and the poems I'm going to read will be from An Anatomy of Curiosity. And I'll start with a poem called, in the spirit of this Christmas, Hanukkah season, A Deafening Prayer. And the first line is the title, A Deafening Prayer. A deafening prayer ignites ionized air, night's holy grail, night's only prayer. An autonomous prayer careens into autobardo, speeds through HVO lanes flowing in the 6 directions, chanting a drone prayer, a rune prayer, Rumi's prayer, to co-pray a cocoon prayer in woodlands with rings, silent owl wings and invertebrate things, with ancient stone forces and surfaces and winding roads to root prayer, dew beads coat spider webs and pop-up mushroom stands we stand on at dawn while praying, counting breath, counting mala, counting on goddesses to paw rosy earth for a rising prayer that hides the dare of prayer, smudging sage and time to reveal prayer's sliding doors, the deals in prayer, impossible to conceal, the stridulating cicada prayer, scratching their shells, their freedom bells, their undulating prayers. The memoration of prayer flight crossing the empty, responsive prayer night. Wind as soul of the newly dead, its shroud, the fold rides north-south to a magnetic center of decay, the death portal prayer, our one way out. An erosion prayer, the rat's prayer, the hat prayer one wears to protect from cloudy moods. A prayer for opening or closing eyes. We watch our step as we tread on the sacred square prayer, the profane prayer, the Janus prayer rug with a gate to the star-spritzing Milky Way, lapped up by the temple cat that lodges near the root cellar gate prayer, the hate prayer, the vote prayer, votive prayer, a passing prayer, flying prayer, snow flurry prayer, a furry prayer. Listen for the tiny prayer, one that flashes light, the blinding prayer, the binding prayer, our first prayer, the prayer before we learn to speak, prayers etched on papyrus, parchment, on imprisoned flesh, toilet paper prayers, crying prayers, dying prayers, poppy fields of prayer, each prayer strapped to song, birthed from wind. The rhizome pied prayer that unselves prayers to molting feathers, father and mother prayer, funeral pyre prayer, releasing prayer cares. A Gordon knot, Deus ex machina prayer, a common prayer, a humming prayer, a buzzing, pollinating pod prayer, a fertilizing prayer, broadcasting everywhere without exception. This poem is, next poem is a prose poem, and there's lots of trap doors in this poem, and it kind of questions who controls who and who creates who and what. It's called Rival Dreamers. The murderer lives in a guest house. As you watch her execute murders, you detect jaundice wash across her cheekbones and soak her eye whites. You believe this will be the flaw that brings her down. She wears a bright orange polyester dress with a yellow stripe that highlights the yellow in her flesh. Ask him to examine, oh no, I'm sorry. I'll go back. She wears a bright orange polyester dress with a yellow stripe that highlights the yellow in her flesh. You send a doctor into the dream, and before the scimitar slices his neck, you want to scream out, ask him to examine you. He could save your life, but no sounds are expelled from your throat. You're a passive witness, not a character in this backdoor drama. There is no saving the murderer. The murderer has a mind of her own, even though she's an ingredient in your concoction. The day trippers at the guest house are of your making. The murderer is not. The murderer might be a figment sent by a rival dreamer, maybe a dreamer who lives in a nearby apartment in your very large building. You have felt enervated of late, and now even your dreamscape requires more than you seem to be capable of controlling. You recognize the murderer as someone you want to help, despite the fact that she has murdered each of the guest house occupants you've created, despite the fact that she's ruining your dream, despite the fact that she has put you in the nasty position of fabricating prey for her to slaughter. Finally, you awaken. Perhaps you awaken to your role as a pawn in your own creation. You imagine the dream's final scenes with eyes closed. The murderer must have been caught by the authorities. She wasn't really that clever, never left the guest house. Any detective sent by a rival dreamer would have noticed the murderer was the one guest house resident who hadn't been murdered. Severed limbs scattered about the anteroom, blood-stained floral wallpaper and Persian rugs. You imagine your dream rival has continued the dream to its natural conclusion now that your figments have been unceremoniously eliminated. Or maybe the murderer is dead, you consider. Surely a life of crime leads to an untimely demise. Or as the murderer hadn't visited a doctor, her jaundice would have caught up with her even if her murder spree had not. Whichever fit conclusion was that of the murderer, you surmise you will never set closed eyes on her again. When you drift back to sleep, the guest house appears before you, though years later. You know time has passed because it is your dream, and dreamers have such insights. You have returned to the scene of the crime and again feel convinced the murderer is in prison or dead, even though you are located in the murderer dream. You often conjure replicated locations when dreaming. It is a habit of yours. Your dream enters the guest house. To your surprise, she is there, the murderer. She is many years older, though her flesh has remained jaundiced, and she wears the same orange polyester dress with yellow stripe, fabric significantly faded. The murderer is standing behind the hospitality desk, checking in guests you have not sent to the dream, gainfully employed. Okay, I'm going to now read a poem called Lesson, and this poem was, I'm both a student, as I think probably most people or everybody is in a certain way. I'm both a student and a teacher. So this kind of explores being a student and a teacher and on Zoom. Lesson. The teacher hits her students with a heart full of snowflakes, and an assemblage of crystals sprouts arms around concave mirrors on which students reflect, which reflect the students. Hence, a heart or two melt into a collective glacial crevasse. The teacher, an old scavenger with a tea cart and an optometrist's eye chart, follows the class remotely through the glass screen as they move with wind and prayer flag, as sound waves or light peels purr like icicles which soften into diamond-esque tears. Another heart or two thaw. A flock of murmuring birds fly from the teacher's wide sleeves that sweep across yellow earth over droughty soils, willowy waterfalls. A silicon mask covers mountain and desert, and students enter and slip through walls of land that spine Earth's curved back, drown in quantities of ocean unrevealed to the eye in a God-sized bed of brine, die as they take a million tests the teacher herself has failed, yet she hurls her voice over sheer cliffs as though her lesson could topple the cosmos, crumble Chronos on the precipice of being disposed, deposed by each question posed by students / by teachers that menaces the fortress, turns words to ashes and rises as starry embers into the depthless hush of time. And I'm going to close with this poem. It's called Opera, and the subject of this opera is night, which is, I think, great opera content. So, opera. I hire Hypnos and his half-brother Death during so-called night. Night, a subjective / relative overlap when shadow mind pulls the lashes down one's eyes, pulls the wool over one's sheep, caws from one's throat. Night as a prognosticating predator, a carrion crow, as a myopic mediator, a psychopomp at dusk, birthing into our deluding lucency echoes of night on ghosted salt flats. Night as a farewell when blasting off into astronomical eventide. Once the glow fades, once night went on for days. Night as what's left after glittering detritus in the morn, pointing, declaiming, that was night. Intelligences perceive night through a variety of orbital periods. Dreams too can collide like celestial bodies, like nebulae desires with impacts on life. Like the disappearance of sunlight, loss of sleep, of an envelope in which night is sealed or wrapped in starry gift paper of fearsome lightlessness and midnight vacuum. Red and black checkered hunting breeches I wore, a de facto Elmer J. Fudd, seriously harming myself and screwing up night after night after night. Once I believed I couldn't live one more night, the fecundity of day, triple creme brie. Night, a painting I lent you one noon, a parting gap for your private hands, recollecting how you collect herbs to dry as visual memories of warm nights, a bundle of desiccated twigs strung like stars in a closeted planetarium. Thank you.
Thank you, Martine. Wonderful reading. Next, we're delighted to hear from Elaine Equi, whose most recent book is The Intangibles from Coffee House Press. Her other books include Voiceover, which won the San Francisco State Poetry Award, Ripple Effect, New and Selected Poems, which was a finalist for the LA Times Book Award and on the shortlist for the Griffin Poetry Prize, and Sentences and Rain. Elaine is widely published and anthologized. Her work has appeared in many, many journals, including the American Poetry Review, Brooklyn Rail, The Nation, New Yorker Poetry, and many editions of Best American Poetry. She teaches in the MFA program in creative writing at the New School, and we're delighted to have her here tonight.
Thank you so much, Marc. Thank you for having me to Lit Balm. It's always a great pleasure. And I was especially excited when I saw I'd be reading with Martine and Maxine and Larissa, who are three of my favorite writers and three of my favorite people. I really wish we were doing this in person together, but this is also great, and it's wonderful to hear your work. And thank you everyone who's joining us, who's making time today to listen to some poems. I'm going to also start, like Martine, with some holiday poems. The first one is called Valium. Mildest, most modest, most vanilla of pills, the 5 milligram, not the 10. I wake up feeling wonderful, having taken one at 4 a.m., as if a soft snow has fallen to cover the sharp edges of frayed and twisted nerves and synapses about to snap. Now all is calm, all is bright. The song Silent Night clearly was written by someone on Valium. That was really an epiphany to me the other night. I woke up and I was like, yes, I'm sure of it. So this next one is called Hark the Herald Angels Sing. It's more of a earlier pre-Christmas, getting ready to decorate. The fading fragrance of distant bells, as men on ladders and cranes string garlands of green and icy white lights between lampposts in preparation for that annual Druids holiday dedicated to the decoration and contemplation of trees. I feel like behind every religious Christian holiday, there's a pagan holiday. This is called Chapel of Love. Echoes and reverberations in the heart of the sacred chapel, in the chapel of the sacred heart. Scalpel of time carving curved space in the heart chapel of the sacred inn. Yes, we're going to the chapel of love. Happy New Year. Maybe some water, yeah. Excuse me. Happy New Year. Push and pull, squeeze through the breathy bottleneck. Music thunders over inconsistencies of plot. One often hears of cheap sentiment, but of what would expensive sentiment consist? I would surround your words with the finest of kittens and steeples, a blood orange sun dripping over snow cones in summer. There are some for whom this would be anathema, but I can't imagine you're one. I don't know if Martine knows, that poem was actually addressed to her when I wrote it. Two things Martine really likes are an expensive cat and a good Zen koan. These are really short. I have a bunch of poems that are really short that I've been writing. This one is called Lap of Luxury. Why not curl up on the velvet couch in the loudly purring room? Team players, Jekyll and Hyde, Martin and Lewis, Lewis and Clark. The simple explanation. I must remind myself, I am not losing my mind. I just need a haircut. Tragic sweater. In the moths that followed the blank, she found herself slowly unraveling. Minimalist critique. Just because it's short doesn't mean it's good, but it usually is. This poem, I wrote this poem kind of early in the pandemic, and I thought I was going to retire it, but it doesn't seem like it's totally safe to come out yet, so I'm going to read it. It's called Everyone into the Pyramid. Grab your pets and your iPads, your altars, your avatars and alter egos. I drink the last light. I am the hours that fly. Take your sex toys and your almonds dusted with pink Himalayan sea salt. Don't forget the book of passwords. Everyone into the pyramid now. This is a dream poem. It's called Spider Soup and Magic Rocks. I did it. Drained the shallow bowl of sweet, sharp spider's liqueur, then pocketed the magic rocks from the scholar's library, stole his dusty memories, replacing them with ordinary stones from the yard. Didn't hesitate, didn't stop to think, didn't think I had it in me, but I did. This is called Replacement Parts. Riding in a taxi on a gray day. It seems everything is under construction behind a mesh veil of soot and scaffolds. A new city is emerging so gradually, no one will notice, the way they say a body replaces all its cells every 7 years. It will feel as if nothing has changed, and yet none of this, not a bit of us, will remain. A different woman will be riding in a different taxi on a cold but sunny day. This poem is called In Memoriam. I wrote it, it's about my father. He died a long time ago in 1989, but I was thinking of him the other day. I enjoy filling the ice cube tray, holding it under the tap, moving it slightly left or right to ensure each cube is created more or less equally. I know machines could easily, would gladly do it for me, but I prefer to do it manually, tucking the tray into the freezer, anticipating tomorrow's first cold drink. The rattle of ice in a glass is a happy sound that always makes me think of my father. Whenever we heard it, we knew he was home. So my father was someone who really enjoyed a good vodka martini, always on the rocks. 2 more poems. This one is called Nature Abhors a Vacuum Cleaner. It's a poem where it's a poem in honor of the letter V. Words with the letter V appear in every line. Nature abhors a vacuum cleaner. Verlaine is great, but I prefer Vallejo. Vespers is a lovely time of day. I would describe myself as vibrantly vague. Being a Vestal Virgin is a vocation, not a career. Vampires have always vacationed in Venice. On the veranda, Vincent and Vivian sipped vermouth. Under the viaduct, vagabonds smoked weed. The Visigoths would certainly vandalize, but the Vandals were not Visigoths. Bobby Vinton was known as the Polish Prince, Mel Torme as the Velvet Fog. Vicky is so vegan, she even feeds her Venus flytrap veggie burgers. The verdict is in. Vests are on the verge of making a big comeback. Everybody strike a pose and vogue, vogue, vogue. And this is the last poem is called Out of the Blank. We waited for word to arrive. like a messiah in a stagecoach or a sheriff riding a thundercloud. But she came without a name, a sheer barely there-ness, teaching us first to hum the song of the game show. Essentially nothing changed, only now it seemed more colorful and easily divided into categories, more fun. Suddenly everyone took up a hobby. Mine is getting in touch with my antediluvian self, my inner reptile. Fire and tools are still a long way off, and language, well, who's to say we haven't been speaking it all along? Thank you.
What language might we have been speaking all along, Elaine? What do you think?
Gosh, poetry.
Poetry, song, maybe?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, obviously, that was the first way things came into creative being, you know, in a communal sense anyway, right? Sitting around the fire and, you know, thumping out some sounds and thumping out some thoughts. That was, I mean, civilization is based on poetry, shall we say that?
I think that's a very good point. Yes, we should say it. It started with us. It started with us.
Might be a good thought for a book, actually. I'll give that a thought.
No,
Thank you so much for reading tonight, Elaine. That was wonderful.
thank you.
And we now hear from the wonderful Maxine Chernoff, who's a professor of creative writing at San Francisco State and a 2013 NEA Fellow in Poetry. She is the author of 6 books of fiction and 16 books of poetry, including Under the Music collected prose poems from Mad Press. This next year we'll be releasing another book of Maxine's, but more to come. In the fall of 2016, she was also a visiting writer at the American Academy in Rome. Welcome, Maxine. You need to unmute, Maxine, sorry. There you go. You got
Is
it.
that better? Okay, now you can even hear me?
Now we can.
Good. I was thanking you all and saying how nice it is to see all of you here and to congratulate so many of you on new and recent and forthcoming work. It's always wonderful to hear so many interesting various voices. I want to also give a special congratulations to Michael and Anania, whose new fish shrift in his honor is out from Mad Hat. And there'll be an event for that. There was an event for that in Chicago, but there'll also be an event for that on our space here on our Zoom sometime in January, which I'm very much looking forward to. Congratulations, Michael. You are very, very deserving. So I'm going to start just by chance. I have a poem that begins with a line by Martine Bellen. So I thought I'd start with it. And it's kind of I don't know, it's a poem where here's what it's really about. I would have a friend and he and I would drive home from school together sometime and we'd go to this park and we'd sit around in this weird place and talk and hang out for a while. And it's about being in that place with him. It's called There, begins with Martine's statement, sustain patterns of meaning. And it was by a lake, so it starts with a lake. Lake's deep notion of speech, uncanny if vague, sundered and rendered by photo or brush, sample of white noise grafted to singing by location one calls a view. There is a glade crowded with time and slow reason, anchored by sound that lifts, canopies of light over trees witnessing branches, skies lingering arrangement, luster and shine, origin unknown. Limbs break in small wind, uncumber themselves with accidental leaves. Pine cones cover soil. It is not music when a voice speaks its phrase, not a gift of a box with a name, not a notation. No one asks how lips move, how ears understand small grief or tender issue, dominating the view, hands and shapes of hands, blue and white flicker of wing, slow breath of afternoon's inscription. So that's the poem, and what isn't in the poem, like on the side view of the poem, is that while we sat there sometimes, I would have my shoes off, and once a raccoon stole one of my shoes. And we had to go off and chase the raccoon. We got a bath, but it was very weird. And I kind of thought I should just let the raccoon have my shoes. And after all, what was he gonna do with it in his life? And maybe it was important. So a couple of new poems, and then I'm gonna read from this older manuscript that has a lot of skinny poems. This is kind of a poem about living right now, and it was in Volt magazine, the really nice magazine that Gillian Connolly does, called You Took the Dare. You took the dare to live here and there as recluse and as host, while everything exploded and flames turned water red. You suggested a menu and gave a proper cause. Nothing endured the losses around you, the final note that sounded past alarm. A cloudy resemblance of what once sufficed came to be known as grace as you listened to grass growing, to a boy praying near the great stone wall. Crisis after crisis stacked up like planes in fog. You counted moss-covered bricks near the former factory where at sunset bright light flickered. What else to do but live? That's kind of how it feels to live in 2021. Let's see how 22 goes. Let's hope it goes differently. This is simply called Poem. Again, it's a pretty new one, and then I'll go to some older ones. Poem. Inscribed in amber, half moon palimpsest, orange and near, we send ghost-like our dearest words through fibers into space. Yes, I can hear you from over the moon and back, in all the corridors of sleep, coming to tell you of the flowers in the kingdom, of its ruins and cliffs. Our lives call out to us. Peach crate summers, winter white lake, burnished return of planet's slow spectacle. And I want to read, for some reason, I was looking at these this morning. These are from a really skinny little book called To Be Read in the Dark, which is kind of a chapbook that Omnidon did of mine, I think in 1911 or 1912, something like that. I'm going to read a number of, they're skinny poems. I don't know if you can see anything, but they're skinny. To Be Read in the Dark. This is called The Box. You and I and the world in the box. The world blue as memory's alien air. You blue as the world. Dust motes gleaming in the corners, historically rich in potential. The box is not the room's white curtains or the camera's closed eye. The construction of a sentence enters the box, leaves the world unsaid. And this one is about memory, obviously. It's called There Will Be Consequences. Memory's edge is too demanding. Asks for reaching when it only wants models. Show me a list, memory says. You reveal cardboard scenery, a sheriff's badge, and slippery stones. Anything, please, for memory's sake. A few spare pigeons, a haunted zoo. Your field of vision seems to be failing. You prop it up with ambition. In its circumference, there are blackbirds. Your childhood wants to have a party. Your attendance is required. You'll conjure up some glass begonias. Cameras, please, memory says. This is called Dickinson's Waifs on Niedeker's Shore. All the sunlight lost in the hollows of an eye. The catastrophe accomplished smoothly like dictation. No one comes to say farewell or even goodbye. You spilling like an overfilled cup, like a lake in April. You cold and shivering. Then a brief flash of embroidery. Mushrooms or birds or your name in black thread. This is called The Language, and I believe this poem was in The Nation, which made me happy to have a poem in The Nation. The Language. A field of black sheep who know church Latin, a shipyard of vessels all named sentence, a tangle of words in a basket of laundry, a night like no other, blackbirds falling like endings, a gift unrecognized by grace, a barrel, only a barrel at the Stoics Hotel. They stay there for years, getting lost in the language. This one is called God's Evening, and there's, I don't know, a lot of poems I kind of try to tease God, but since I kind of don't believe in God, I don't think probably my mission is working. God's Evening. He is tired of pity's mansion, tired of Sunday and its cautions. Even with loss, he is complacent. From where he sits, he sees a landscape, several lemons and a book. Media studies is his interest, one of several, he will tell you. No longer eager for approval, his children's sorrows a bad novel. Touching his hair, he reads a survey. He'll sleep all night, emptied of pronouns. And this was written so long ago that I wrote it with, what is the guy's name? He just died, and I was kind of, I shouldn't say I was happy he died, but what's the name of the ex-secretary of, was he the Secretary of Defense? Was he the Secretary of? And he was really.
Colin Powell.
No, Colin Powell wasn't the one I was writing this about. This is a worse guy from before.
Rumsfeld.
Rumsfeld, thank you. I wrote it with Rumsfeld in mind, but it can be any annoying politician that you want to think of, called The News. So it's about some bad guy and his identity changes decade to decade. The News. The inhuman among us want to sing as others. They have a sacred place constructed of their crimes that surely corresponds to something in the world. Their subtle lack of grace makes it strange and rich, singing accusations in a pure contralto, which almost sounds like truth, dressed as a prince, or darkness curling under an open, well-lit door. So it can be your enemy of the day, who that poem is about. Yeah, okay, so I think I'll read this one next. Marginalia. The essence of essence is essence and razors. The essence of certainty, razors and truth. The plow turns around, and that is a verse. Intangible subject grounded in syntax. I hereby give notice to all my familiars that fusion in nature results in a crime. He wrote the epic for the army of ants whose lost civilization was bottle cap size. He wrapped it in pine needles, ineffable treatise of sticks and dust. A cannibal's art is pastiche at best. The last great theory presented a risk. We had to seclude it for its own good. The clock met its maker, the shirt its iron, steam filled the room, and afternoon chill. This is called The Bed on Fire, and it starts with this image of a smiling assassin, and it was written around the time that Gabrielle Giffords got shot, shockingly, during her meet and greet at the Safeway in Arizona, called The Bed on Fire. The smiling assassin isn't a dream. What is embodied asks us to listen beyond rooms. The doctor has scissors, the hour confessions. A lingering fable serves up its ghosts. Intention burns like any ember. Because it's almost December 31st, I should read this poem called December 31st. Any sparrow on a branch defines a doctrine of catalog or hymn. In betweenness, a gesture. Left to private song, a species attends to its music. What is isolate remains attached to silence. Let this stick be X, this witness Y, voiceless coda to this day. And I'll read a couple more. Birds seem to be the issue of the moment here. This one is called Aviary, not Avery, but Aviary. And it's about birds in winter, which in California isn't a big issue, but in the Midwest where I grew up certainly was, or the East. Aviary. Excuse me. Pity birds' winter, icy torpor of nature reduced to want and shadow. An alibi is a frozen witness. To end where it ends is only digression. A story is whole without a staircase. Moon's dictation unread in the dark. To pantomime loss is tragedy's license. Finitude, please, frozen ground asks. Excuse me, I'm sorry. I have this new thing where I cough a lot. I'll end with one more God poem. This time he's traveling somewhere. He's on the tarmac. He's about to go on a trip. So if next time you fly a plane, maybe it's God who's sitting next to you not wanting to wear a mask. I don't know. Threshold. God on the tarmac wants to know how systems work. He wants the rules in clear block letters, which in principle he can read in any language. But right now he wants only Spanish, which he remembers from when he was young, just in knickers. Slick back hair when shiny mirrors mirrored him. Oh wait, he remembers a play he once saw, moving as well as supremely clear. God is nostalgic for simple instructions on how to open or close a box. He never knows when intervention will breed ineptitude or shame. His shame alone is nameless, he thinks. And then he peels and eats an orange. There must be a word for its bitter taste. Thank you.
Thank you, Maxine. And would you tell everyone about your new book that we've got coming out shortly? Huh?
Well, I'm going to put together a selected non-prose poems and new poems. I think, is that what we're talking about, Marc?
That's right. That's right.
Okay. Because other than that, I'm not sure what book we're talking about. Okay, well, that's good that we're talking about the same book. Yeah, sometime this year I'll have the energy to flip through my zillion poems and put something like that together. And I'm very grateful to Marc for offering to do it. So thank you very much. And thank you all for coming today and for being such a lovely audience.
Well, and thank you, of course, Martine and Elaine and Maxine again for this wonderful guest appearance, for their wonderful guest appearances. I'm now going to actually hand over the mic to my friend Cassandra, who's going by Jonathan Penton today.
I'm Jonathan. I need a hat, but I've got a flower instead. I do have a couple of open micers, but I'm not sure if Michael Anania is still here, but I was hoping he might read for us as a way to flag the coming kind of tribute. So if I give you some time, what's the chances, Michael? Can I? Is it possible? I can't hear you yet.
I'm sitting outside of Houston without a book.
Oh,
I could go inside and get a book, or I could do something from memory.
Oh, look, I reckon memory is a great thing. We've talked a lot about that with the poets today. What do you reckon? Do you want it? Do I go with the other two poets first and come to you at the end, or do you want to kick off?
I'll wait till the end. That's fine.
Perfect. All right, you can get your poem in your head. That would be fantastic. Thank you so much. Okay, so the first poet we have on open mic is Linda Klein. Bob, is she around? She is there.
Hi, that's me. Here I am.
Hey.
Hello. This is great. Thank you.
Wonderful. If you've frozen for a second at the most inopportune moment.
They want me to read. Can you grab a selected?
That's brilliant. I love the fact that we
Selected. Yeah. We might then move on to the next person. Come back to Linda
we'll have
since
to
she's
go,
frozen.
I think we'll have to go to our brilliant wombat John, who is going to read for us while Linda kind of, I don't know if she's disappeared, because you know I'm doing the Jonathan thing not very well today, and I've had 2 glasses of champagne, even though it's 10 o'clock. So
But you're on holiday, so that's okay, right?
I'm on holiday, so that's all good. So John, can we get you to kick off, and then we'll go back to Linda, and then
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, since this is the founders reading, here's a poem called Marc Vincenz's hat, and he changed his hat, but anyway, it's about his last hat. It's flatter than a flounder squashed by a steamroller. Not that they're powered by steam these days. Gasoline or diesel are more likely. It's called a newsboy cap, like the hats worn by shipyard workers back in the days of the Washington Naval Treaty, when steam pushed battle cruisers through oceans. But don't confuse it with a tam o' shanter and the mercury that gives Mad Hat its name. The world can't deal with an epidemic of crazy Scotsmen all quoting David Hume to their imaginary bagpipes, but the Flying Scotsman was a steam-powered train that never left the ground as far as I know. There's a long tradition of sages wearing fish on their heads dating back to ancient Sumer. They charted the course of planets from atop ziggurats taller than Hong Kong's Victoria Peak and Herman Melville's Greylock Mountain combined. This hat's been all over the world, but not to Iraq as far as I know. What of its Romanian connection? Is there any relation to a Transylvanian castle with plumbing problems? Be that as it may, it inhabits a haberdashery where there are more dust motes, atoms in a mole of gas, and Planck links in a meter of thread than people. Thanks, everybody. And DeWitt Henry, don't be complacent because my poem's coming for you next.
I love your lip balm poems. How good is the Transylvanian castle with plumbing problems? I've said before I want to live in your head. I'd be very happy there because it's a kind of happy, surreal place with, I think, penguins with plastic tiaras, and that's all we need, I think, in this world. So awesome. Thank you. We're going to try and go back to Linda now. If she's
Okay,
back.
I apologize. I hope this doesn't happen again. This is one of the things with Zoom, but it was great to hear everybody today. And this is a poem called Relic. We rush about gathering pages. What colorful lament leaves regret? Leaves we meant to photograph. We gaze up, looking for stars, building the sun. The equality of secrets. Secrets positioned, pruned and tied neatly along the fence. Task at hand becomes a distraction. Phone calls unanswered, voices unheard, messages unread. Is there a serenity in the steps you shuffle? And what comes of the pages? Myths of scorn and greed, blanketed in the silence of memory lost. We return again to meditate as we move along underground tracks through underwater tunnels. We gather again, a scrap of ideas, a phrase of prayer, a creation we made, our ancestors' assignment remembered. What will be remembered? In this rhythm beaten down, generations lost, a faded photograph, only to be slipped between the pages, folded to form book to be passed on to future relations, still unknown, still unconceived, held on by tradition, held on by a string, held on until your grasp fails. Let go. Are we left empty-handed? What imprint in the dust? Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I agree. Like the equality of secrets. What a fantastic line. Thank you so much. And we now have the amazing Michael Anania, who is going to read for us next. I think if someone got the book out of his...
Somebody got that. My friend Diane found the book. This is
All right. Awesome. Thank you.
I'll read if you have patience for it, 3 short poems.
Definitely.
Okay, this one is called Rain Dancing, and it's dedicated to the wonderful singer Diane Reeves. Settle it then. The syllables snap between your finger and your thumb, skidding briefly as spun, a wooden top wobbling across an uneven floor, sound as certain as rain dancing, spirit after spirit, random, predictable, and strange, leaves in their own sweet time and frequent melody. Yeah, this is an Omaha poem, and it's just fun. It's called Heroic Fragment. When Bowles and Otis, who were cousins, fell on Herman, who was alone, singing Sam, the ragman said, "Leave them boys alone," meaning Herman, who was so big he was called the grizzly bear, though Herman lost as usual. And then a little more poetically, a poem called Imbued with Light. Columbine, its 5 doves turned downward, or eagle's talons, Aquilegia caught hold of as a bright instance of air. Jacob's ladder, blue petals ascending ray after ray, infused, lit that is, with pollen, its soft gold drawn out as a filament is drawn across a blue point of fire. Speech, Pindar said, the lyre's strings pulled taut across the sun. Thanks.
Incredible. I don't know how anyone wouldn't show up to the Michael Anania special after that. It was brilliant. I'm toasting you. I've already had too many champagnes, so I might send Marc into battle for us now.
Right, thank you.
Yeah, so we have the special feature on the life and work of Michael Anania on January 15, and it will feature such luminaries as Robert Archambault, Reginald Gibbons, possibly John Matthias, Leah Graham, and Mary Bidinger, and several more, including, I think I heard a rumor about Maxine Chernoff being involved there somehow. You got something to say about that, Maxine? Unmute, my dear.
I have unmuted. Am I unmuted?
Yeah, you're unmuted. Now you're muted again.
Unmute. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I've been asked to be on a panel where I ask Michael questions, and the only reason I agreed is because Michael answers so fully that I don't have to say much, I would imagine, right? So all I have to say is, how have you enjoyed writing poetry over these last years, Michael? And then he'll continue, and I'll just sit there smiling. It'll be fine. It'll work out.
How old are you now, Michael? Unmute, my friend.
82.
82.
Michael was my teacher first when he was 31 and I was 19. So I've known Michael for a long time.
You look super good for your age, Michael. Wow. What's
Well,
your skin
it's an
regime?
illusion created by the camera, I'm afraid, but
It might have something to do with Viagra, but I wouldn't.
well, maybe keep my head up, I guess.
But thank you all tonight for this wonderful, wonderful show. Once again, we were blessed with the poetry talents of Martine Bellen, Elaine Equi, and Maxine Chernoff. And next time, which will be January 15, we feature Michael Anania, as mentioned. And I hope you will all join us. It should be an event to be remembered. I believe there's going to be some kind of cabaret involved or something like that.
Thank you.
And just to top off, here a little poem by the wonderful Swiss poet from his book Kissing Nest, which I translated. And this goes like this. Tonight, I want to sleep in a deep ultramarine from the other side of the oceans. Tonight, I want to believe you lie next to me and your breaths accompany my breaths as mine accompany yours. It doesn't matter where. Thank you so much for this wonderful lip balm, and hope to see you next time. Lots of love. It'll be the new year, so let's hope we shall sail into a more paradisical future than we have in the last couple of years. But either way, stay strong, feel the love, give poetry to the world, and everything will be fine. Love you guys. Good night.
Good night. Thank
Good
you.
night, Mark. Good night. Thank you.
Night.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you. Good night. Be well.
Thanks, everybody. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, John.
Thank you.
Everyone was wonderful.
Gotta
Thank
be a
you.
better new year, better year than
It
last.
better be. It better be, Cindy. 22 owes me.
It's an even number. It'll be a good year. Good
Gonna
year
be.
for all of us. Health, happiness, creativity, and Cassandra Atherton.
Thank you
Great
so
to
much.
start with
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Happy